Recording.
Hi, I'm Ben Lewandowski.
Not loud enough, Ben, sorry.
Hi, I'm Ben Lewandowski, and my first argument is that it's not really up to people whether or not they're exposed to drugs. That depends on the environment in which they're raised. And if they're raised in a good environment, then they're less likely to be exposed to and pressured into the use and abuse of drugs.
Can you state your side of the other side?
Yeah,
Which
and
discussion
I'm
panel is it?
side A,
And your which discussion panel?
discussion panel 2. And these risk factors could increase due to poverty, what the parents do for a living, and what kind of neighborhood these kids are living in. Drug abuse has increased in younger people in recent years, likely due to media, television, and famous people that are bad influences. And
Well, people will often say that drug and substance abuse is caused by environmental factors, like you're saying. This may be true for certain things, but it still cannot be a valid excuse for doing drugs. Drugs can basically make people do really stupid things because they'll get high and then they won't have as much control over their body. According to Timberline Knowles, some of the bad effects of the most abused drug in the USA, marijuana, could be distorted perception, impaired coordination, difficulty in thinking and problem solving, ongoing problems with memory and learning, etc. These symptoms will all help contribute to making someone a genuine drug-abusing drug.
Don't forget to cite your sources. Sorry, go ahead.
But it's not. It is kind of like when where they're in like the environmental and like how they're like treated and how like they're raised and stuff like that. But I think addiction is a disease, and the government helps treat diseases and prevent / research the diseases. They fund the research and prevention and treatment. For example, like cancer research. Many people do not understand why or how other people become addicted to drugs. It is often really mistaken for for drug abusers that lack moral principles or willpower, and that they could stop using drugs simply by choosing to change their behavior. In reality, drug addiction is a complex disease, and quitting takes more than good intentions or a strong will. In fact, because drugs change the brain in ways that foster compulsive drugs abuse, quitting is difficult, even for those who are ready to do so. And through scientific advances, we know more about how drugs work in the brain than ever. And we also know that drug addiction can be successfully treated to help people stop abusing drugs and lead productive lives.
Well, publicity about addiction suggests it is a disease so powerful that addicts no longer have free will, and lawyers have already used this addict is so helpless argument to win billions from tobacco companies. Blaming others for our addictions is popular today. In Canada, some lawyers are suing the government, saying it is responsible for getting people addicted to slot machines and video games. While he said addicts were interviewed and saying they were sick, he tells the government made him sick, and he gets $50,000 in a lawsuit. And now he's suing the government again to pay his therapy bills. Says abcnews.com.
And then, like he was saying, when people abuse drugs, their lives are changed drastically, and lots of people are rushing to the help constantly to help these people recover from their addictions and their messed up lives. Where do these people go? They're going to these rehab centers. And what other people what other people is concerning? Well, mostly everyone, because when American taxpayers are collecting taxes from your everyday American, eventually, that's going to add up, and it's going to be a lot of money collected from innocent people to pay for someone else's property. and according to the NSATSS, the average cost of these programs is about $7,000 a month. And since people may be coming in for more than that time, the cost could reach over $30,000. That could be a lot of money getting taxed from other innocent people, and this money is going towards people who mess up their own lives.
So what you are saying is that people should not give money to those who are addicted to drugs.
Well, what I'm trying to say, kind of along those lines. What I'm just trying to state is that people lots of times with this rehab should not be so just keen on giving people free treatment. I think that people should be saying, if I'm going to start doing this tobacco or I'm going to start doing drugs or marijuana, they should be in the ideology of saying, yes, I know this is going to mess up my life, and there's not going to be everybody behind me to support me and back me up, because it's my own life I'm messing up, and it's my choice whether I can go and do rehab, and I can go to rehab, or I don't just get lots of other people's money to pay for my problem, or I can just not do drugs.
But still, even if they do mess up their own lives, they can still mess up others' lives because of them being addicted to drugs, which is another reason why we need to help them. They can get really violent from the drugs, and they can end up taking a knife to another person, an innocent person, which might be another reason you should help them.
Well, throughout a person's life, they will learn to grow up and know what is right or wrong for them. Things like peer pressure into trying a drug or substance is not a valid environmental factor. If someone is trying to get someone to try a drug, and the victim decides to give in and take it, that was their choice. They could have said no. They could have thought about it. These kinds of people are the ones who are not well in tune with their feelings and their brain, what they're thinking about. If they would have said no, that would have been one less person having to go into rehab eventually. If they would say no, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a bunch of Americans that have nothing to do with someone else's problem could have not had about $472 billion taken away from everyone. Their refusal makes them think and know that they know what they're doing most of the time and aren't easily pulled into things. What are environmental factors triggered by? They don't just come from thin air. They are triggered by other people making bad decisions and influencing people. Then you have all these innocent little substance abusers who never did anything or are affected by the big bad world. Well, maybe instead of just saying, oh, this is never going to change, and I'm forever stuck in this bad place, and I'm going to become a drone easily controlled by anyone, you should get over that you might be stuck in this big bad world. And if you are, try to make the best of it by not being pulled into the ocean of drones that gave up and gave in. Defy the simple brainwashing logic most people use. Break that barrier and discover the true meaning of what's happening and how you can fix it.
Source?
Source? It's on my source sheet.
We decided in the discussion.
Oh, so I should have just put it here instead of on my
You should get your sheet. Where's your
There's a
sheet?
problem with that.
Yes.
Because if you're going to read someone else's words, you need to give them credit.
According to an article on the National Institute on Drug Abuse's website, quote, a person's environment includes many different influences, from family and friends to socioeconomic status and quality of life in general. Factors such as peer pressure, physical and sexual abuse, stress, and parental involvement can greatly influence the course of drug abuse and addiction. Basically, this is saying that, yes, they do have a choice, but their choice is so heavily influenced that they don't really have much of their own choice. It's basically decided for them. Yes, there is a chance that they escape from that, but that chance is small. They're more likely to fall into those cracks.
Well, addiction is behavior, and all behaviors are choices, says John Stossel. What's next? Are we going to blame fast food restaurants for the foods that they sell based on the marketing because one person got addicted to hamburger and french fries? 2 weeks after that, he said that some children sued McDonald's, claiming that the fast food chain made them obese.
I think you guys are stating that you guys are almost talking like addicts are not going to change, even though with all the help they're getting. So like you guys are stating that even though we give them all this money, it's not going to help them. But it would help them, because most of the rehabs that can help the addicts actually do help them. And the economy would improve, because once the addicts who are no longer addicted, they can pursue a career or work like being a farmer, a teacher, a lawyer, a manager, and pay taxes once they have that job, which would help the government a lot.
Yeah, and to add to what he said, people who use drugs do have some long-term effects, but they can still help out in society or produce great music. The Beatles. In an interview with the Washington Post, Paul McCartney confirmed that drugs influenced some of the group's songs. A song like Got to Get You Into My Life, that's directly about pot, although everyone missed it at the time, McCartney said. Day Tripper, that one's about acid. Lucy in the Sky, that's pretty obvious. There's others that make subtle hints about drugs, but you know, it's easy to overestimate the influence of drugs on the users.
Well, another mistake American taxpayers are making is not realizing substance abuse relapse. According to Discovery Fit and Health, relapse is when someone has been abusing a substance and goes to rehab to stop abusing it, or just stops in general, starts back up again. And according to Discovery Fit and Health, 90% of Americans are starting up smoking and other substance abusing processes even after they have quit or gone through rehab. What this means is that American taxpayers are often making the same mistake over and over again by collecting money and putting these people through rehab, even though only a small percentage really stop using a substance. This just proves that the American taxpayers can't realize when they are just paying money for someone to stop abusing a substance for about 1 to 2 months.
Well, Johnson Bancole, interviewed by Washington Post, said, "We have little indication that treatment such as rehab is effective. When an alcoholic goes to rehab and he does not recover, it is he who is said to have failed. But it is the rehab that is failing alcoholics." Even at face value, the numbers are not impressive. In 1990, a summary of 5 membership surveys from 1977 through 1989, AA reported that 81% of alcoholics who began attending meetings stopped within 1 month. At one time, only 5% of those still attending had been doing so for a year.
The National Institute on Drug Abuse is actually nearing a breakthrough in rehab sciences, so money should be invested to help speed along this process, so as to allow people to be rehabilitated and start contributing to society again. And according to a paper by William L. Dewey, in order to improve research, we must recognize that addiction is a brain disease with behavioral, genetic, environmental, and development components as proven by research supported by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. We need to increase our nation's investment on the National Institute on Drug Abuse. We recommend a 50% budget increase over the next 5 years. Scientists are now poised to capitalize on recent advances in genetics, neuroscience, and developmental biology to create breakthrough treatments that can revolutionize care and reduce associated public and healthcare safety problems. The NIDA needs to support to continue these efforts.
Well, like I was saying, lots of these, like you were saying about these environmental factors and how you're saying genetics and all this other stuff. I mean, these people, they don't, even though they may be forced sometimes to do it, sometimes they just need a broader understanding of what's actually happening, and they need to break past that barrier of the logic they're using, like, oh, too bad, I have these bad genetics, therefore I'm going to start abusing drugs in my life, nothing I can do about it now. They need to break past that and realize that there is something that they can try to do, and they don't have to justify themselves and say there's no more hope left, and that's it. There's just no hope left, and I can't do anything else. I need to just break past that and realize maybe if I just think it through and I open up my mind a little bit more, maybe then I can go and I can try to fix this problem.
I think you're contradicting yourself there because you said that they may be forced to, yet they still have a choice. If they're forced to do something, then they don't really have a choice of whether or not they do it.
Okay, maybe they're not forced to, but maybe they feel like they're being forced to, even though they're not. Because if they feel like they're being forced to do something, well, then they probably think they are. But if they're not, and they can't realize that just means they need to go into a deeper process of thinking.
Yeah, but sometimes if they think that they're being forced to try out a drug or something, or alcohol, then maybe they're actually right. They were being forced. It's very possible.
Well, drug addiction usually begins in adolescence, which is when the prefrontal cortex is just finishing developing, which might explain why the exposure to drugs at this time is very critical. That's why schools offer prevention programs. That would be much easier to stop it before it starts. especially because rehab is said to not even work, and taxpayers are paying so much just for something that doesn't even work. And fewer patients are paying for self-treatment. That fell to from 13.8% in 1986 to 8% in 2003. They're getting themselves hooked on drugs and expecting someone else to pay for them.
Well, in many ways, rehab could also help the addicts and maybe even help the government, even though we are paying those taxes. Because what do addicts want? They want more drugs, right? So how do they get these drugs? Do they buy them? No. They're addicted. They steal them. And when people steal, crime goes up. And the government obviously wants to prevent crime. And the more money the government is using, the more it helps. From 1994 to 2007, the amount of drug-related homicides came down from 23,180 to 14,841, considering the amount of a big decrease considering the amount of homicides. That's from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reports.
What you gonna say now?
I have a third person.
All I can really think of in that is I'm not sure how people would manage to steal drugs other from stealing instead. Usually people seem to buy drugs from, the distributors. I'm not sure how they could steal from them because usually they have guards and stuff because that stuff is worth a lot of money to people who are.
They wouldn't necessarily steal from the people directly, but they might steal from other stores to get the money to pay for the drugs. So they're still stealing.
Either way, crime goes up. So this can help.
If this is happening, maybe we need to enforce police more. And I mean, if this crime keeps happening and these people are making all these bad decisions, maybe this is happening, either up police stuff so that way they can mess up their own lives, but it can still get under control, or we just ban drugs completely from these addicts. That way we don't have to worry about this problem anymore.
Drugs have been banned though. Other than Colorado and I think California, marijuana and all other drugs are illegal everywhere else. They already have been banned. That's why it's such a problem. If they were legalized, people, and you've seen how the economy's been booming in Colorado because of it. They legalized marijuana, and now they have to pay heavy taxes for that. But that can still cause economic problems. I mean, yeah, it sets it up for now, but we don't know that that's going to be a continuous growth.
And then there's another thing. If you ban drugs, stuff like certain medicine for like a sickness that you have or something, you could still end up abusing that. They can't ban something that will make you less sick.
That's why they're passing laws to lift the ban on marijuana in the United States.
And I think that, why are we spending all this, like $472 billion, I think I said before, why are we spending all this money on just helping people who mess up their own lives? Why don't we spend it on other things, like stopping addiction, trying to crack down on marijuana, destroy it, doing all this other stuff? We can be spending this money on other things rather than just keeping the problems going and just trying to resolve them every single time. If we make one effort with all this money that we're getting, we could seriously do some work to stop this addiction with substances.
Well, once we still keep paying for the addictions, like I said before, crime would go down. And it would also help the government because the government could pay less for the police since drug-related crimes went down. So substance abuse costs our nation like $406 billion annually, like you said. And treatment can help reduce these costs. Drug addiction treatment has been shown to reduce associated health and social costs by far more than the cost of treatment itself. Treatment is also much less expensive than its alternatives. For example, like the average cost of 1 full year of methadone maintenance treatment is approximately $4,700 per person, whereas 1 full year of imprisonment costs $24,000 per person.
Now, another thing is this relapse. What's going to happen is when you're sending all these people, yeah, it's helping the government and everything, But what about this other, maybe it's 10% or 20% that it's actually working on? Because the other 90%, Discovery Fit and Health was saying that 90% of Americans, that after the relapse, after the treatment, they'll start going into relapse again, and then they'll just start back up the drugs. And so it's only effective on a couple things, and it's kind of just a mask to show, oh, it's working and everything, and it's going out. But then nobody else realizes that they're really starting back up again.
Just lost my train.
That was a good point. This was a good point too. Guthrie and Ben and Alec need to talk a little bit more too. Especially Alec.
Huh?
Have you said all of your arguments yet? All three of your arguments?
I'm still thinking of the right point to jump in.
Well, just say any of the three.
Well, it would be best if someone were to live a happy life. I mean, imagine yourself being addicted to drugs, and according to straight talking parents, yeah, you lose your ability to concentrate. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Back to Luca's point. Yeah, how much is a life worth? These people are ruining their lives maybe, but we are giving them a chance with rehab just to give them a new chance, to give them a fresh start. Yes, they could make the same decisions, but they could also not contribute to society. Yes, we are spending a lot of money on that, and we could probably take some of it and put it towards prevention, but we could also just as easily focus on this, help these people get back on track, and then they could learn the uses of prevention also.
Yeah. Also, the people who already have been treated, they can also help other people who are addicts, because from their perspective, they've been through what the addicts that are addicted right now have been through. So now they can actually help them. And if you go to like any like drug rehab website, there's like all those things where you can like talk to somebody who's been like experiencing those things, so they can actually help you. So the people who are no longer addicted could actually help those addicts. So it would actually help more and more people.
Yeah, and they could also help people who are thinking about starting drugs, because they could see what would happen to them if they did that. And they could show them all the things that could go wrong in their life.
Well, what do you propose that drug treatment is, as you've been talking about a lot? What is that entitled?
Drug treatment is basically just helping the patient like not be addicted anymore, and like teach them how to like say no, and develop refusal skills on drugs.
That's why we have schools, and I think that if we put more of this into public education, we're not going to have to go through all this rehab stuff, because if we just implement it into the school system, just a more broad subject on teaching kids how to say no to drugs and stuff like that. I mean, that would be a lot better than having to spend all this money on rehab every year. And we just implement it into our school systems, that could help us, because like Guthrie said, our minds are still developing, and so it could help us for later on when our minds are fully developed, and we'd be saving more money, and we'd be able to learn about it earlier, and everybody would be able to learn about it. Not just because when somebody's dumb and they start using drugs, they're not going to go to a rehab website, and they're not going to start doing all this stuff, because why? Because they want to abuse the drugs. But if we start early, and we show kids, and we show people, how bad they are, and it's more than just your average health class. They're saying drugs are bad, don't do them. If we give a more broad subject on what they're actually doing, then maybe that could help.
Sometimes the kids don't really understand the consequences sometimes. They can still end up addicted.
That's what's happening.
Usually the addiction, wait, am I interrupted?
No, keep talking.
Usually the addiction, it starts whenever you're young, but some kids don't really understand the consequences and they can end up addicted anyways. Maybe to just relieve stress or to be cool, and then they end up more addicted whenever they're an adult.
Well, if they're getting addicted as a child, don't you think the parents would be able to see, like, you know, bloodshot eyes or sudden weight loss or weight gain and detect that their child is actually doing drugs? I mean, the parent actually cares that much about the kid. It's kind of obvious a lot of symptoms about drugs, and they would get their kid to stop doing drugs as soon as possible instead of just letting it go. And
Yes, but once you're addicted, you just can't stop.
Not all parents care that much about their kids. It's sad, but it's true. Not all parents care enough about their kids to get them the help that they need if they are addicted to drugs.
And even if they, oh, sorry.
And, I mean, you're talking about all this addiction problems, and what if the parents, what if the parents are noticing they're sneaking and doing all this stuff, and the parents don't care? Well, this is why, you're saying that the school may not provide saying what the consequences are. This is why the school needs to provide a lot deeper and really need to get inside someone's brain to show them that drugs are bad, not just saying that, marijuana is all of these really bad things, and these things are going to be really, really, really bad for your health. People aren't going to remember all that stuff. They need to figure out a way to get into your brain and implement the idea that drugs really are bad, and we should be using this money to be spent on good philosophy for the schools and not just the rehab. Good philosophy, stopping addiction and everything.
So, how is that going to help the people that are already addicted to drugs? Are you just saying that we'll forget about them and let them suffer? Or how are we going to deal with them?
Yeah.
Because that's still a big problem. I agree with you that we should put some of it towards education, but we need to keep some of it, because what are these people going to do with their lives? Just keep abusing drugs, and crime rates will continue to rise.
And the government will have to pay more to stop those crime rates.
Yeah.
Added on to what they pay for the rehab.
well, if rehab doesn't even work, then I don't see why we're paying so much for it. And if, as Alex said, once you're addicted, there's like no going back. So if there is no way to cure addiction, then if we're still paying for rehab, that still doesn't make sense.
So you can still quit a little bit at a time.
A little bit at a time, like, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, it's not. Well, sorry.
You can go.
Well, it's not just rehab. They actually help research the diseases in order to help have better ways to help the people who are already addicted and help the people who are going through the process of being addicted.
If you're saying that addiction is an actual disease, is there even a scientific name for this? Is it been proven that is it an actual disease, or is it just described as a disease?
Is it just an excuse?
It's a psychological disease which can take control of your brain and controls your decisions that you make.
Is it some sort of parasite or virus? Because I know what addiction is, but I never really thought of it as a disease. Because you can't just, when you have a bad brain virus or whatever and all that stuff, you can't just think it out, and you can't just say, just think really hard to get rid of it. You can do that with addiction. It may be hard, but this is why addiction may not be a disease, because you can eventually, you can think about it and you can try to get rid of it, even though it may not work, but it's not a disease. Because with other diseases, you cannot tell the virus or whatever it is inside your head what to do. But with addiction, you partially can. You partially can try to get it out.
Addiction must.
It's not a virus disease, it's a psychological disease. It's in your brain. It's not something that you see, you catch, or you get. It's something you have because of what you've done, because of your drug abuse, that causes the addiction. And then once you're addicted, everything you do in your life revolves around getting more drugs. getting that amazing high again.
Well, what I think is that people should be spending more money on just putting out psychology things and all this different stuff rather than doing this rehab, which is going to be doing all this other fancy stuff.
What is the psychology things or the fancy stuff that you're talking about?
What do they do at rehab anyways?
Well, at rehab they actually research and try to prevent the disease. Well, I don't know what fancy stuff it is.
Well, I think that rehab should be used for other things besides drug abuse. I mean, for things like cancer, people don't do bad things and then get cancer. People don't go, if they go commit a crime, they don't get cancer. But I mean, with addiction and stuff like addicting to drugs, people, that's their decision. It's like you see cancer and you're saying, do I want to get this or not? It's like you have a choice. And that's what you have with addiction. You have somewhat of a choice. It may not be a big one, but you have a choice. And there needs to be, and people need to think of better ways, more psychology that you can put behind your brain. That way you can prevent addiction and you can just stop it. And it should be spent, instead of spending it rehab.
Not everyone has the mental capacity to just say no, and they're so desperate about wanting to fit in and trying to be cool that they are willing to do anything.
Yeah, it's almost like they're forced to do something.
Yeah.
Because in order
By
to fit in.
themselves.
Yes.
And by their brain, because they don't have the capacity to be proud of who they are, and they feel like they need to do something else to fit in and be cool.
Well, they lost that capacity when they chose to do drugs.
Some people never had that capacity to begin with. Some people have such low self-esteem that they feel like they have to do something to get attention and to be cool.
And then the addictive ingredient keeps them, smoking.
When people have really low self-esteem, there's a lot cheaper programs than rehab that they can do to get them through that. I mean, if they have really low self-esteem and they have other stuff, you don't have to go to rehab. I mean, you hear on the announcements all the time, there's certain programs at school saying, oh, you have low self-esteem, come to here and learn how to be a leader, stuff like that. You have all this different other stuff that can help contribute to make yourself feel better and from becoming one of those drones that just sits there and just does drugs.
Okay, we're gonna have to call it there. Oh, that was awesome. You guys did a great